Hey y'all, Comrade Gunpla here. This is going to be a very rushed video, right? You see, I got myself into a bit of a situation here where I need to make a diorama for GBWC in a day. I'm gonna get started and talk you through how I got here during the process, so I'm not just boring you with 3 full minutes of explaining. My best bet at this point would be to use one of my existing builds for a diorama, and I picked the Master Grade Dom, the only Master Grade I did this year. It's a UC suit, and I did shading on this, so it should work pretty well for a diorama. I have just about no time to get any additional supplies shipped in, so I have to use exactly what I got. My idea here is just doing a scene where the Dom is gliding on sand dunes, just like when the Black Tri-Stars first got deployed on Earth to deal with the white base. That way I also don't have to weather the Dom a whole lot, since canonically they were supposed to be freshly deployed and got just absolutely destroyed within 2 battles. I'm also going to program a bit of a light show as I promised in my Dom video, and hopefully that will make up for the lack of intricacy in the diorama. Anyways, let's get into it. I first had to figure out the base situation. I had this plain wooden box that I actually got a couple of months ago for this exact purpose, so I can put the LED controller in this. I need some foam on top of this for the terrain, and all I have is this half a sheet of insulation foam. Luckily, it's still big enough to cover the entire area. So far, my only experience in terrain building was basing Warhammer models. This is my first time doing something this large. I'm not exactly going to have time on research now, so I'm just gonna wing it with common sense and memories of all the diorama videos I've watched. After cutting it to size, I needed to rough up the surface a bit. Making terrain is all about introducing natural unevenness to the surface, so starting early would add another layer to that depth of that unevenness. This step doesn't have to be so great, as most of this will be covered up later by the texture paint, and mostly the entire model that goes on top, so I can be pretty free-handed with this step. So while I'm doing this, let me tell you exactly why I have to finish this in less than 30 hours. Initially, I made a community post talking about Bandai's recent metaverse failure, and that kind of made me want to make a video talking about Bandai, specifically the Gundam division's recent business decisions, dissecting their motivations, stuff like that. I remember when I checked the GBWC's USA page like a month ago, it said that the competitions were going to be held offline at Hobbytown locations, which I thought was actually one of the better business decisions that Bandai made, albeit very low effort. It's something that, if executed right, could actually get more people into the hobby and boost the brand image, stuff like that, even though I don't think that that's something that Bandai really cares about all that much. I'll make a dedicated video on all that later. Then I went on the GBWC's page to check again. The time was Thursday the 19th, around midnight. And when I got on the website to check, well, turns out the Austin location is hosting one of the local stops on Saturday of the same week, and I had absolutely no idea. Now, this means I really have to maximize my time usage, since I got like about 30 hours and I haven't started like anything for the competition yet. For those of you that are not familiar, GBWC stands for Gunpla Builder World Cup, which is an official build competition Bandai actually hosts. Last year I entered with this customized HG Barbados 6th form. I only first started doing custom details last year, so I was really proud of this at the time, although now that I look at it, I can see how this is a very underwhelming tournament entry, right? This year I wanted to do a diorama, since it seemed like dioramas tend to do pretty well in GBWC, but that's a lot to bite off for someone that got caught with their pants down, not having anything prepared until the last minute. To be honest though, that's partially Bandai's fault, I feel like, for barely advertising this at all and opening up the schedule 10 days before the actual competition date. How was I supposed to find out, right? Again, I'll talk about all that in an actual business analysis video. Okay, anyways, back to the build. Now that I'm done with scraping, I'm also gluing the scraps back to other areas of the surface. You gotta make everything count, you know, take some off and add some back. Boom, you get 2 times the unevenness. Time for the texture paint. I only had this tub of Vallejo earth texture with me. I got this a while back because this is the only texture paint on Amazon that's on sale, and it seemed basic enough for most purposes. I got a big area to cover, so I'm just using a spoon. Now I'm running into a bit of an issue. Again, I've only worked on miniature bases so far, so I didn't expect how in this size, the brush stroke, and I guess in this case the spoon stroke, would be so prominent. I actually tried to smooth over the surface with a brush, but honestly it didn't help that much. I have to smooth the surface so it doesn't look intentional. I'm doing this by first dabbing on the wet surface with the back of the spoon. This way I'm creating a random yet kinda uniform rough surface. Now the brush strokes are gone, but this is looking a bit too rough for a sand dune, so I need to smooth this back down. I'm doing this with a sponge brush, so the smoothing will be entirely random and wouldn't get rid of all of the unevenness that we created earlier, just reducing it down a bit. I know I said I had 30 hours, but in reality it's much less than that, as this stuff needs to dry, so I guess I'll just have to revisit this in the morning. Okay, so after about 10 hours, this stuff has fully dried. Meanwhile, I went out and grabbed a bottle of school glue. So far, I've only used one texture paint, so it can look a bit one note, which is why I'm going to add more textures by gluing little bits of sand on top. School glue is perfect for this, as I can spread this around and it's only strong enough to keep some of the sand on, so it gets more natural randomness to the sand distribution. It looks a bit strange right now, but trust me, after painting, this is all gonna come together. I first primed the whole thing and applied some pre-shading. It's terrain, so you don't have to be too subtle. It's all about just adding more and more layers as you go, so it doesn't look intentional. After that, I'm doing a first layer that's a little darker than my intended final color. This is mostly yellow, red, and some gray to wash out the saturation. After that, I added white to the paint and went over the entire thing with a thin layer of the lighter color. Now that we have a pretty layered base, time to add some wash. I'm creating my own wash here with oil paints and mineral spirits, so I can get the exact shade that I want. I've been doing this a lot lately. It's essentially DIY panel lining liquid. The result from this is a bit too coarse for panel lining, but for washing, this is perfect. You can grab a pack of oil paints for like 20 bucks with all the colors that you'll ever need, so this is a nice money-saving trick as well. After we're sure that every crevice has some wash sitting in, before this dries fully, I'm actually going to remove most of this with more mineral spirits and some tissues. This way, the wash only stays in the places it needs to be. This is looking quite a little darker than what we need. A final layer of dry brushing will bring the colors back, but we need to wait for the wash to dry before that. So to maximize my time, I'm going to plan the smoke and positioning during this time. I've watched enough Boiler Hobby Time videos to know that I need cotton for this job, so I grabbed some earlier today. Well, really it was polyester filling, but anyways. The idea here is setting two large clouds and have the dome sitting on top in this iconic little gliding squat, and just hoping that this dynamic look will make people overlook how simple this really is. To fix everything down, I'm using this brass rod, which will also serve as kind of a stand for the dome, right? These rods will go in at kind of a slanted angle so they can fit under the leg skirts of the dome to maintain stability in that forward tilting pose. After that, I added a thinner wire around the rod to act as a skeleton for the smoke so that it maintains its form better. Second clump is about the same, except I added two wires this time for a variety, so this clump has two tails. Now, we definitely can't just throw some cotton and call it a day, so I'm painting these. For the lower half, I'm doing a little bit of yellow and red to get that explosion look. For the tip, I'm doing a bit of black to get that burnt smoke look. Okay, now my shade has pretty much dried. It's already looking pretty good, but this is more of a dirt ground, not sand. So we need some aggressive dry brushing. I'm doing this with a mix of Vallejo buff and gray to again wash out the saturation. the result is looking much lighter. In order to pick out some of the more prominent details, I brushed on some of that highlighting color directly to the edgier parts. At this point, it's already around midnight on Friday, so I'm calling it for the terrain. Test fitting the smoke cloud. Since the cloud covers up a lot of the ground, I think this is looking good enough. At this point, I painted all the sides of the foam black, and that's it for the painting. I had to drill some holes so the LED control wire can stick through the box. Since this area is going to be covered by smoke, I don't have to be too careful. I just have to get a big enough opening so 4 wires can come through the hole. I'm using this knockoff Elegoo Arduino to control the LEDs, right? I planned on doing this when I built the dome, so it actually had 3 separate leads for different sections of the LEDs. One for the monoline cockpit, one for the thrusters, and one for the chest light. This way I can control all 3 sections separately. I wrote a very simple LED control code. Basically, all the LEDs need to use PWM leads, which are capable of controlling the brightness. There are 2 counter values for keeping track of the cycles, and a direction value so the LEDs can get brighter first and dim down after. Basically, I'm increasing the counter by 1 every loop until I get to 255, at which point I reset the counter and change the direction. Depending on the direction, the eye and thruster LEDs will either use the counter value as the brightness and get brighter, or 255 minus the counter value as the brightness to get dimmer. For the chest, I'm making it count to 40, right? And between 40 and 50, it'll turn off for every even value, and it'll reset after 50, so I can achieve a quick blink effect. There's a little 20 millisecond delay between loops that's absolutely needed so that you can actually see the effect. I'm not sure if anyone would actually want a full-blown LED Arduino tutorial. I feel like there are a ton of those out there and I wouldn't be adding much. It's mostly just playing around with the values to get the result you want. Normally I would just power this through a wall outlet, but since this needs to be at a competition, I need to run this with the 12-volt battery pack, which I do have a few lying around. So now time to wire everything up. Let's take a look at the result. It's kind of hard to catch that blink of the chest because the frame rates of the camera and the LEDs don't really match up. There's supposed to be 5 blinks every cycle, but you can only see 2, maybe. I was hoping the LEDs on the legs would at least illuminate some of the smoke, but honestly, it's just not doing the job, right? Watching a lot of Boyle Hobby Time videos, he uses a bunch of, I think like a LED filament, inside the cotton to illuminate the cotton, which I don't have any on my hands, and it's obviously way too late to get some right now, so I'm gonna cheat a little bit by hiding some LEDs in the ground under the smoke. These 2 LEDs will be powered in series, so basically going from one native lead to the other LED's positive lead, and then making a loop that way with I think I used a 68 ohm resistor here. That should be enough for 2 red LEDs in series. But yeah, so the result looks better than what it originally was. It's still not super bright, but I think this passes as the smoke getting lit up. I think that was enough talk. Let's take a look at the result. So that's it for this DOM diorama. I think given the amount of time I had, this is a pretty good result, right? I entered the competition with this and ended up getting a local 3rd place. So that's pretty good, and I had a lot of fun at the event, which I'll be talking a little more about in a future video, right? I really do think that this is a step in the right direction, at least for American fans, and I'm really hoping that people showed enough support for Bandai to feel like this is worth doing next year, and so on and so forth. But yeah, anyways, hopefully this is a informative video for you guys. I'll see you next time. Peace.